Oh my God! Whoa! That was cold. Do I have to pee in the shower? No. No, I don't. But I like it. And it's free. Nowadays, it's hard to find things to enjoy that are free. So I decided to share my favorite true cryptid stories for you guys to enjoy for free. And if you really want to amp up the fun, you can watch them while peeing in the shower.
I don't know where else to share my story. I don't really care where it's posted. The only thing that matters is that it is posted. My name is Kyle. This is my Goatman experience. I learned about the Goatman while camping in the woods with my friends Paul and James. We'd all been friends since 3rd grade, and Paul's family was moving away. It was supposed to be a 1-hour hike, but Paul got lost, and it ended up taking us 3 hours to make it to the campsite. It was a difficult day for all of us. I guess it was worse on Paul. Paul and his dad had hiked these woods for years. He must have been distracted. Because we made it later than expected, and we walked way more than expected, we set up camp, made some food, and just relaxed. That night around the fire, things were quiet. The thought of what was coming weighed heavily on us. We could barely look at each other. No one moved, but no one wanted to go to sleep. It's like we all hoped that if we just sat there quietly, the time would stop. Paul exhaled and broke the silence. "Hey, you guys want to hear a story?" I was a kid when my dad first told it to me. James and I stood quiet for a moment, and then I spoke up. I said yes, not because I wanted to hear some silly story, but because it was kind. James followed suit. That was the first time I'd heard of the Goatman. I barely remember Paul's story. It didn't make any sense to me anyways. He was a goat, a man, a shapeshifter. Maybe if I was in the mood to hear it. But all I could think about was how much it was gonna suck to say goodbye. A few months later, I was hanging out with James and his girlfriend Mary. She was a really nice person. She'd go out of her way to make sure everyone else was doing well. Never made anyone feel second-rate. We were on our way to McDonald's to get some dinner, when I could have sworn I saw Paul. I asked James to stop the car. He was confused but pulled over. I looked out the back window, and there was Paul, standing in the road now, grinning. "Do you see that?" I asked James. I mentioned before Mary was wonderful, but I did feel alone. I wasn't dating anyone, and we didn't all hang out as often as we did before James and Mary started dating. "Is that Paul?" James asked. James started preparing to turn the car around, but another car was coming. By the time it passed, Paul, or that Paul look-alike, was gone. We continued to McDonald's. Mary said we probably just missed Paul, and someone that looked like him was in the road. People sometimes see what they want to see. She had to be right. Paul moved away months ago. There was a line at the drive-thru. My eyes wandered aimlessly out the window, and I could swear I saw Paul again, this time right by a dumpster. I didn't bother to tell James or Mary. I just got out of the car and headed towards him. As I walked, his expression didn't change. He started backing up and disappeared behind the dumpster. By the time I made it there, he was gone. But there was an old homeless man there, looking at me like he expected me, with that same creepy grin. I ran full speed back to the car, jumped in, and locked the door. Mary immediately asked if I was okay. I was so confused. I wasn't injured, but I wasn't okay. I started telling them what happened, but before I came to the part with the homeless man, he was already standing beside the car, grinning. We took off. I was visibly upset. James and Mary drove me to my house. When we got there, no one was home but my dog Einstein. James and Mary came inside with me and helped me search the house. Once we were sure it was clear, they left. I locked every door and window in the house, went to my room, and laid down. But my mind refused to rest. Every creak, every peep, every sound inside and out made me jump. I had my cell phone with me ready to call 911 on anyone or anything. It was my parents calling me. They said they were on their way home. Einstein wasn't feeling very well, so they took him to the vet. Quite a few years ago, I was camping out in the woods and had a strange experience. I am honestly asking if anyone has heard of this kind of thing with the Bigfoot. My girlfriend and I decided to go on a camping trip. It was far from the city, at an abandoned campground. Nobody around for miles. It was windy as hell that night. We had supper, pitched the tent, and settled in for the night. I woke up a couple times in the tent and swore I could hear heavy footsteps. But with the wind, I thought it was just my vivid imagination. But I did not sleep very good that night. In the morning, my girlfriend and I got up and prepared some coffee. She looked back and turned white. I was confused until I turned around. I turned back and looked back at the tent. Right over the back of the tent was a tall tree, and in that tree, maybe 9 to 11 feet up directly over the tent, was a freshly severed leg of a deer, dripping blood onto the tent. It had been impaled onto a broken branch. It was a fresh, bleeding kill. The part that still haunts me today is how far up the tree it was. I'm 6 feet tall, and there was no way I could have gotten that limb up there without climbing the tree. But there was no good way to climb that tree. I'm still wondering to this day how it could have gotten there. It wasn't there when we got to the campsite. It had to have taken something with huge reach to do that. The limb was also severed and not cut, like it was ripped off the body of the deer. Has anyone ever heard of something like this with a Bigfoot? I have tried to explain this event with any logical and rational process, but I'm at a loss. Needless to say, we packed up the car in record time and pissed off out of there as fast as possible. We never went back either. In the summer of 2018, I went out one morning to water my roses as usual. I noticed someone had trampled all over them. I was pissed. What the hell? The next day, I see 2 kids walking back and forth on my road. I only have one neighbor, and she doesn't have kids. I've never seen kids on my road. So I figured, these kids must have trampled my roses. So I go to get my shoes on to confront them. Suddenly, I felt a jolt of fear and paranoia. I felt I shouldn't go out to the kids. Instead, I go to look at them from the front window. I start to feel angry and embarrassed that I let some stupid kids get to me. I go to get my shoes, but when I get back, they were gone. Later that evening, things got weird. Who's there?
We are sorry to bother you. We are lost and need to call our parents. Please let us in. Let us in right now.
I have a gun. I will shoot you if you try anything.
Let us in. You are making a mistake.
I open the door, gun ready. I see their eyes look like black voids. I felt like I was being hypnotized. Then the taller boy started walking into the house. I snapped out of it and slammed the door. I ran to lock the back door. Then the knocking and screaming stopped. They were gone. My neighbor came over. She said she heard yelling. I told her what happened. She said I should call the police, but I never did. I don't think they'd believe me.
My husband and I lived on a small farm. We had been living there about a year when this happened. One evening, I had just finished putting the horses away for the night. I thought about how weird that animal looked while I walked to the house. A few weeks later, in the early morning, I'm woken up by the dogs carrying on. I went back to the house. I went back to sleep. Thinking about it now, it was so strange how I just went back to bed after seeing that thing. I didn't wake up my husband. I didn't even tell him what happened. When I thought about the creature, I began to feel bad for it and less afraid of it. A month went by, and I was out riding. I saw it again. I saw it a few more times, looking at me from the woods. Then I stopped seeing it. I haven't said anything about it until recently. I did tell my husband and sister eventually. I don't think my husband believes me, but my sister said she saw it one afternoon, watching her from the woods. What was that thing?
It was 1996. I was 13 years old. It was late, and I was just laying in my bed thinking about baseball when my mind went completely blank. Now, to be fair, I was lying in bed. My mind going blank and me falling asleep was the entire point. But this was different. For starters, I wasn't tired. I felt very awake, but my mind was blank, as if I was tired. Another strange thing was the position I was in. I was on my back. I never slept on my back. Ever. And to make things even more bizarre, I have no idea how or when I switched from lying on my side to my back, but there I was. I began to notice movement in the corner of my room, and then I saw him emerge. Slenderman. He began slowly approaching me, but I didn't move. Not that I couldn't move. I didn't want to. Even though this tall, faceless thing from the shadows was walking towards me, I felt calm. When he got to the foot of my bed, he started stretching his arms out towards me. I should have wondered what he was going to do, or what he wanted, but I just didn't care. I just laid there, calmly, like it was all completely normal. He continued stretching his arms out at me when my mom walked in. For some crazy reason, my mom walking in scared me. All at once, I was covered in sweat and breathing heavily. She ran to me and asked what was wrong. She said she heard me screaming from down the hall. I told her I wasn't screaming and left it at that. I didn't want to tell her about anything I'd seen. Being covered in sweat and telling her I wasn't screaming, she decided to check my temperature, but it was fine, and I looked fine the last time I saw her just before bed. She watched me closely the next day. In the end, my mom decided it must have been the Doritos I ate while watching the baseball game on TV that night. Doritos causing random screaming and sweating in the middle of the night doesn't make much sense, but neither does what really happened.
The government might look at these and say, there isn't enough evidence to justify believing in these things. That's because they're stupid. Also, no one will give them any kickbacks to find evidence of these cryptids. If they did, they would track every new sighting on the news, every day. We'd hear about how many cases of cryptid sightings there were. They'd put up scary graphs, and they'd measure it by state. Maybe even exaggerate some of the numbers. But until that happens, how are you going to stay informed? Well, you need to check out my Paranormal Encounters series. Cryptids, the paranormal, and the just plain creepy. All brought to you. Here's a great one. I was stalked by a Wendigo and 2 other scary stories. Who doesn't love a Wendigo story? Click here.